They say money can buy everything. Mansions, cars, power, even respect. But Jack knew there was one thing it could never buy: the sound of his daughter's laughter. Jack was a billionaire, a man whose name echoed in the financial world like thunder. To the world, he was a symbol of success, a man who had everything. But behind the grand gates of his estate, he was just a broken father with a house too big and too quiet. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with their only daughter, Frenzi. She was his world, his last connection to love, his fragile piece of hope. But Frenzi was not like other children. She had been born with a condition that doctors never fully explained. She could not walk, she could not sit, she could not speak. At 15 years old, she lay in her bed with her eyes open, breathing softly, her gaze drifting across the room. She was alive, but she was trapped inside a body that did not respond to her will. For Jack, every day was torture, watching his little girl breathe but never hearing her voice. He had spent millions on treatments, flown across countries, begged the best specialists, and prayed in every possible way. But the answer was always the same: she will live like this. As long as she lives, the doctors told him. Jack had money, influence, and power. Yet in the face of his daughter's silence, he was powerless. The loneliness in his mansion grew heavier every day. Frenzi's presence was both his only comfort and his greatest pain. Finally, knowing she needed care, he turned to his loyal assistant. "Find someone," Jack said. His voice was stern but hollow. "Find someone who will take care of my daughter. Someone patient. Someone kind. I can't do this alone anymore." The assistant searched everywhere. He called agencies, interviewed caretakers, and posted offers with salaries higher than some CEOs made. But the moment people heard about Frenzi's condition, they refused. Nobody wanted to look after a girl who could not move, speak, or respond. It was too much, too strange, too heavy a responsibility. Finally, one day, the assistant returned with someone. Jack was sitting in his office, staring at the family portrait on his desk, when the door opened. A young girl stepped in, barely 18 years old. Her skin was dark, her hair tied back simply, her clothes modest. She carried herself with a quiet nervousness, her hands clutched together. "This is the only one who agreed, sir," the assistant explained. "Her name is Catreen." Jack's eyes narrowed. His voice cut like a blade. "Are you joking?" he snapped. "She looks like a cleaner. I asked for a caretaker. My daughter needs someone qualified, not a maid." The assistant swallowed hard, guilt in his eyes. "Sir, I searched everywhere. Nobody else would come. Everyone turned me down the moment they heard about Frenzi. But this girl," she agreed without hesitation. "Please give her a chance." Catreen lowered her head but didn't speak. She knew the look in Jack's eyes, the look so many had given her before. To him, she was nothing. Just another poor black girl, invisible in a world built for the powerful. But Jack wasn't ready to see her humanity. "Fine," he muttered after a long silence. "Since she's already here, let her work. But not with my daughter. She can clean the house. That's it. You keep searching for someone else." Catreen's chest tightened, but she nodded. She needed the job. She had no family, no home, no safety net. This was her only chance to survive, even if it meant scrubbing the floors of a man who saw her as less than nothing. Days passed and life in the mansion continued. Jack stayed busy with business calls, meetings, and lawyers. The assistant carried out his duties quietly, and Frenzi lay in her silent room, staring at the ceiling. But one evening, something unexpected happened. Catreen was cleaning the hallway when she noticed something unusual. Frenzi's door was slightly open, and from inside she felt a presence, a pull, as if the girl's eyes were calling her. She hesitated, remembering Jack's strict order. Never enter Frenzi's room, but something in her heart urged her forward. Quietly, she stepped inside. Frenzi's eyes were wide open, locked directly on Catreen. There was no sound, no movement, only a deep, desperate gaze. Catreen froze. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not as a maid, not as a poor black girl, but as someone who mattered. Slowly, she whispered, "Hi there. I'm Catreen. I'm not supposed to be here, but you look like you need a friend." Frenzi's eyes flickered with something her father had never seen. A spark. In that moment, something powerful began. A bond that would defy wealth, race, and even the boundaries of a broken body. The mansion was enormous, filled with polished marble floors, chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, and walls covered with expensive paintings. Yet despite all the luxury, the house felt hollow. Silence ruled every corner, except for the occasional echo of Jack's stern voice or the ticking of the grand clock in the hallway. But in that silence, a secret was taking root. Catreen began to slip into Frenzi's room whenever she found a chance. At first, she only stayed for a minute or two, afraid Jack or the assistant might catch her. She would lean against the bedside, speak softly, and smile at the girl who had never known companionship beyond medical care. "Hey, beautiful," she would whisper. "I know you can hear me. You don't have to talk back. I'll do the talking for both of us." Frenzi's eyes, which so often stared blankly at the ceiling, followed Catreen's every movement. When the young caretaker cleaned, Frenzi's gaze never left her. When Catreen sat and spoke, those eyes softened, almost as if they wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Days passed and a pattern formed. Catreen would finish her chores, wait until the assistant was busy, and sneak into Frenzi's room. She would tell her stories about life outside the mansion, about the noisy streets, the colorful markets, and the laughter of children playing in parks. She described the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the sound of rain tapping against an old tin roof. Frenzi's body remained still, but her eyes glowed brighter with each story. For the first time in her 15 years of life, she wasn't just existing, she was living through Catreen's words. And then, one afternoon, something miraculous happened. Catreen was sitting beside Frenzi, telling her about a silly moment when she had slipped in the mud as a child, when she noticed a flicker of movement. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then her heart nearly stopped. Frenzi's fingers twitched, just a little, but enough to notice. Catreen gasped. "Oh my God, you moved," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "Do it again, sweetheart. Just a little more." Frenzi's hand shifted, barely noticeable, but enough to send tears to Catreen's eyes. She wanted to scream, to run, and tell Jack, but then she remembered his words. "Never go near my daughter." If Jack discovered she had disobeyed him, she could be thrown out of the mansion. And worse, Frenzi might be left alone again, trapped in her silence. So Catreen made a decision. She would keep this miracle a secret. "Don't worry," she whispered, clutching Frenzi's hand gently. "This is our little secret. You don't have to show anyone else. Just me, only me." And so the secret bond grew stronger. Each day, Frenzi pushed herself a little more. A small movement in her hand became a lift of her arm. The lift of her arm became a shift of her shoulders. Her body, once so still, began to respond whenever Catreen entered the room. When Catreen was around, Frenzi came alive. When she left, Frenzi returned to her motionless state, as though the spark of life went with her. Catreen was overwhelmed, torn between fear and joy. She knew she was breaking Jack's rules, but how could she stop? Frenzi wasn't just a patient. She wasn't just the billionaire's daughter. She was a girl who had been trapped in silence for too long, now finally waking up to the world because of her. One night, after sneaking into Frenzi's room with a flashlight, Catreen whispered, "You know what, Frenzi? You're the bravest girl I've ever met. People think you're broken, but I see you. I see the fire in your eyes. You're stronger than anyone knows." For the first time, Frenzi's lips curved, just slightly, but enough to resemble a smile. Catreen froze. Her breath caught in her throat. You smiled," she said, tears spilling from her eyes. "You really did." From that moment on, Catreen was no longer afraid. She didn't care about Jack's rules. She didn't care if she lost the job. What mattered was Frenzi, the girl who had finally found a reason to fight back against the prison of her own body. But Jack was not a fool. Billionaires didn't stay at the top by ignoring details. He began to notice small things. Frenzi's breathing was different. Her eyes seemed brighter. Something was changing and he didn't know why. The question was, how long could Catreen keep their secret before Jack discovered the truth? The mornings in the mansion always followed the same pattern, silence broken only by the distant hum of staff, Jack's footsteps on the marble floor, and the rustle of newspapers as he sipped his coffee. To outsiders, it was the life of luxury. To Jack, it was another day of emptiness, watching his daughter remain lifeless in her bed. But Catreen knew the truth. Behind closed doors, Frenzi was changing. It started small with those tiny twitches of her fingers. Then her arms grew stronger. Soon, when Catreen walked into the room, Frenzi would attempt to lift her head, straining as though trying to reach her friend. The progress was slow, fragile, but it was real. Every night, Catreen whispered encouragement into Frenzi's ear. "You're doing amazing. Nobody thought you could move, but you're proving them all wrong. You're stronger than the world knows." And every night, Frenzi gave her something in return. Whether it was a slight tilt of her neck, a blink that seemed deliberate, or the faint curl of her lips into a smile. Catreen began spending more and more time in the girl's room. At first, she snuck in only when she was sure nobody was around. But as Frenzi grew more responsive, it became impossible for Catreen to resist. She would steal longer moments, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Frenzi's fragile hand, and telling her about dreams. One afternoon, Catreen decided to try something bold. She leaned close and whispered, "Frenzi, if you can hear me, if you understand me, try to move your arm." For a long moment, nothing happened. Catreen's heart pounded, her palms sweating. Maybe she had imagined everything. Maybe she was only clinging to false hope. But then, slowly, shakily, Frenzi's arm lifted. Not much, but enough to make Catreen gasp and cover her mouth in shock. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, "You did it. Oh my God, you actually did it." She wanted to laugh, to scream, to tell the entire world. But instead, she hugged Frenzi gently and whispered, "This stays between us. You don't have to prove anything to anyone else, just me." Frenzi's eyes shone with something deeper now. It wasn't just survival, it was trust. She trusted Catreen in a way she had never trusted doctors, nurses, or even her own father. But with progress came danger. Jack began noticing small changes. One morning, as he entered his daughter's room, he thought he saw her fingers curl. He leaned in, his heart thundering with hope. But when he called out her name, Frenzi lay still again, as if frozen. Jack frowned. He convinced himself it was just his imagination. Yet the thought lingered. Was Frenzi improving? He summoned doctors once more, sparing no expense. Specialists flew in, examined Frenzi, ran tests. But the results were the same. "She is unchanged," they said. "It must have been a trick of the light, Mr. Jack." Jack tried to believe them. And yet deep inside, he couldn't shake the suspicion that something was happening when he wasn't looking. Meanwhile, Catreen's connection with Frenzi deepened. She discovered little ways to make the girl react, singing softly, humming old tunes, or simply holding her hand. When Catreen laughed, Frenzi's eyes sparkled. When Catreen cried, Frenzi's gaze softened as if she wanted to comfort her. One night, while the mansion slept, Catreen whispered a secret of her own. "You know, Frenzi, people look at me and only see a poor black girl, someone who doesn't belong in houses like this. But you, when you look at me, you don't see that. You just see me, and that means more than you'll ever know." It was then that Frenzi did something no doctor had ever witnessed. She leaned her head ever so slightly toward Catreen's hand. A simple gesture, a miracle. Catreen froze, her heart nearly exploding. She held the girl tightly and whispered, "I'll never leave you. I promise, no matter what happens." But promises were fragile things in a house ruled by secrets. And the more Frenzi came alive in Catreen's presence, the closer they came to being discovered. One evening, Jack returned home earlier than expected. He walked past the hallway, heading toward his daughter's room. From inside, he heard something he hadn't heard in years. Laughter. Not his own, not the staff's, but a soft, trembling sound that seemed to come from Frenzi's room. His footsteps quickened, his hand reaching for the door handle. Inside, Catreen was holding Frenzi upright, her body trembling but alive, her eyes lit with joy as she played clumsily with a toy Catreen had brought. For the first time in her life, Frenzi looked like a girl, not a patient. Jack's hand froze on the door. His heart raced. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. And as he pushed the door open, the truth was about to come crashing down. Jack's hand trembled on the door handle as he pushed it open, his heart hammering inside his chest. For years he had prayed, begged, and spent fortunes hoping to see his daughter move, just once. And now, in the dim light of Frenzi's room, he was witnessing something he had stopped believing was possible. Frenzi was upright. Not perfectly, not steadily, but she was no longer lying lifeless in her bed. Her frail arms moved clumsily, but they moved. Her lips stretched into a faint smile, her chest rising and falling with excitement. She was alive in a way Jack had never seen before. And standing beside her was Catreen. The young black girl held Frenzi gently, supporting her as though she were carrying the most precious treasure in the world. Her face was glowing with joy, her laughter filling the room like sunlight breaking through a storm. Jack froze in the doorway, too stunned to breathe. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, but then Frenzi's gaze shifted, landing on him. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. "Frenzi," Jack whispered, his voice cracking. "My baby girl." Catreen gasped, spinning around. Her face turned pale as fear gripped her. She knew she wasn't supposed to be there. She knew she had broken his rules. She opened her mouth to explain, but no words came. Jack rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside the bed. Tears blurred his vision as he reached for his daughter's hands. "You're moving! You're smiling! How? How is this possible?" Frenzi tried to lift her hand toward him. It trembled in the air before falling back. But even that was more than she had ever done before. Jack's tears spilled freely as he kissed her fingers. "You're alive! You're really alive!" But in his overwhelming joy, his eyes shifted toward Catreen. His expression hardened. "You," he said sharply. "What are you doing here?" "I told you never to enter this room." Catreen swallowed, her hands trembling. I didn't mean... Don't lie to me!" Jack's voice thundered, the old businessman's authority rising. "You disobeyed me. You touched my daughter. You... Stop!" Catreen's voice broke, louder than she intended. Her eyes burned with tears as she looked directly at him. "Don't you see? She needed me. She was reaching for me. She came alive because someone finally treated her like a person, not a burden." Jack stared at her, stunned by her boldness. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that. Especially not someone like her, a girl he had dismissed as nothing more than a cleaner. Frenzi let out a small, strained sound, not a word, but a noise. Something between a gasp and a cry. Jack froze. His daughter's eyes darted between him and Catreen, desperate, pleading. For the first time, he realized the truth. Frenzi wasn't responding to doctors, machines, or endless treatments. She was responding to her, to this girl he had looked down on. Jack's chest tightened. All his pride, all his wealth, all his power meant nothing compared to the connection blossoming before his eyes. He wanted to deny it, to believe it was coincidence, but he couldn't. That night, Jack stayed by his daughter's side. He tried everything, speaking to her, holding her hand, even singing softly like he used to when she was little. But Frenzi's eyes looked empty again, her movements fading back into stillness. It was as if her soul had retreated, waiting for someone else, waiting for Catreen. Jack's heart broke in ways he didn't understand. He had been her father all these years, but she didn't come alive for him. She came alive for a stranger, a girl he had dismissed, insulted and treated as less. The next morning, Jack called Catreen into his office. The air was heavy with tension. He stood behind his grand desk, staring out the tall glass windows at the sprawling estate. While she stood silently near the door, her hands clasped nervously. "You disobeyed me," he said coldly, his back still turned. "Yes, sir," Catreen whispered. "You entered my daughter's room against my orders." "Yes, and yet..." He finally turned. His face lined with exhaustion and something she hadn't seen before. Humility. She smiled. She moved. For the first time in her life, Frenzi came alive. "Because of you." Catreen's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. "She doesn't need a billionaire, sir. She doesn't need machines. She just needs someone who sees her. Someone who loves her as she is." The room went silent. Jack's hands trembled on the desk. For years, he had believed money could solve everything. But this girl, this poor, homeless, black girl, had shown him something his billions never could. He lowered his gaze. His voice was softer now, almost broken. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. But please, don't leave her. Don't leave my daughter. She needs you." Catreen nodded slowly, her heart heavy. "I'll never leave her. I promised her that." And so the lines between employer and servant began to blur. For the first time, Jack allowed Catreen to stay by Frenzi's side. For the first time, he admitted that he wasn't enough. But deep inside, a new fear grew. Because Frenzi's happiness, now belonged to Catreen alone, and Jack wondered what that meant for his place in his daughter's heart. The days that followed felt like stepping into another world. For the first time in years, Frenzi's room was filled with light. She could now sit upright for short periods with support, her hands moving more freely, her arms lifting with effort but determination. Her eyes shone brighter each morning, and her faint smiles had turned into expressions full of emotion, joy, sadness, longing. But all of this came with one condition. It only happened when Catreen was there. Whenever Jack entered the room, Frenzi returned to her stillness. Her gaze would drift away, her body would slump, and the spark seemed to vanish from her. Jack tried everything, speaking softly, telling her stories from her childhood, even bringing expensive toys and gadgets. Nothing worked. She was alive for Catreen and Catreen alone. At first, Jack convinced himself it was temporary. She's just used to her, he told himself. Once I spend more time here, she'll respond to me too. But days turned into weeks, and the truth became undeniable. Frenzi's soul had chosen her. And Jack, one of the richest men in America, a man who could buy anything, could not buy his daughter's happiness. It burned inside him, not hatred, but a painful jealousy he couldn't explain. He was her father. He had loved her since the moment she was born. He had sacrificed, fought, begged the world for her sake. And yet when he reached for her, she gave him nothing. But when this poor, black girl walked in, this stranger who had nothing, Frenzi came alive. At night, Jack sat alone in his study, staring at his wife's portrait on the wall. Her eyes seemed to watch him, filled with the same warmth he had lost years ago. He whispered into the empty room, his voice breaking. "Why her? Why not me? I'm her father. Why won't she come alive for me?" But the silence gave no answer. Meanwhile, Catreen was unaware of the storm inside Jack's heart. She poured herself into Frenzi's care, teaching her simple exercises, encouraging her with every tiny improvement. She spoke to her like a sister, a friend, sometimes even like a mother. Their bond was unshakable, built not on blood or wealth, but on trust. One afternoon, Catreen decided to try something new. She gently lifted Frenzi from the bed and placed her on a soft rug on the floor. For a moment, Frenzi wobbled, her body fragile and unsteady. But with Catreen's hands guiding her, she moved, one small step, then another. They weren't real steps yet, but the intent was there, the desire. Catreen clapped her hands, her voice trembling with joy. "You're walking, Frenzi! Look at you! You're walking!" Frenzi's lips parted in something like a laugh. Tears filled Catreen's eyes as she hugged the girl tightly. But neither of them noticed Jack standing in the doorway. He had come quietly, hoping to surprise them. Instead, he watched in silence as Frenzi, his daughter, leaned into Catreen's arms with love and joy that she had never shown him. His heart shattered and swelled at the same time, broken because he wasn't the one she needed, and overwhelmed because she was finally living. That night, Jack sat in his study again, wrestling with emotions he had never known. Pride screamed at him, reminding him of the differences between him and Catreen. He was a billionaire, a man respected by society. She was an 18-year-old orphan, homeless, black, with no future in the world he lived in. They were worlds apart. And yet, she had given him the one thing money could not, his daughter's smile. The conflict nearly consumed him. He wanted to be grateful, but jealousy poisoned his gratitude. He wanted to honor her, but pride whispered that she didn't belong. But his heart, the broken heart of a father, knew the truth. Catreen was not just a helper. She was the miracle he had begged for, the answer to years of hopeless prayers. Still, his pride would not let him say it aloud. Instead, one evening, he approached her quietly in the hallway. His voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Catreen," he said. She turned, surprised. "Yes, sir?" Jack's eyes lowered. "Thank you for what you've done for Frenzi. You've given her life. You've given me hope again." Catreen smiled gently, shaking her head. "Don't thank me. She did this. I just gave her a little push." Jack studied her face. There was no pride in her, no sense of superiority, only humility, kindness, and love. She had nothing, and yet she gave everything. For the first time in his life, Jack felt small in front of someone else. That night, as he lay awake in his empty bed, he made a decision. He would no longer hide behind pride. He would no longer let race, class, or wealth define the walls of his heart. He needed to do what he had never imagined. Something that terrified him more than any business deal, more than losing billions. He needed to ask her to stay, not as a servant, not as an employee, but as family. The mansion was no longer silent. For the first time in 15 years, laughter filled its walls. Frenzi's laughter, not loud, not perfect, but soft and fragile, like music from a broken violin that was still beautiful. Every sound from her lips was a miracle, a reminder that hope had not died. Catreen was the center of it all. She was the anchor that kept Frenzi alive, the light that drew her out of the shadows. And Jack knew it. He saw it every day, the way Frenzi's eyes lit up when Catreen walked in, the way her body leaned toward her, the way joy bloomed in her presence. Jack loved his daughter more than life itself. And now, to his surprise, he found his heart turning toward the young woman who had given Frenzi life. At first, he tried to ignore it. He told himself it was gratitude, admiration, nothing more. But the truth grew clearer with every passing day. He was falling in love. It terrified him. Jack was a man of power, a billionaire who could command rooms with his presence. But standing before Catreen, he felt like a beggar. She was young, poor, black. Everything society said was beneath him. And yet she was everything he needed. One evening after dinner, Jack called Catreen into his study. The firelight flickered across the room, casting long shadows. Jack stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped tightly, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in any boardroom battle. "Catreen," he began softly, "I need to speak with you, not as your employer, but as a man." She frowned slightly, nervous. "Yes, sir?" He turned to face her, his voice trembling. "You've given me something I never thought I'd see again. You've given my daughter life. You've given me hope. And you've given me love where I thought my heart was dead." Catreen froze. Her breath caught as she realized what he was saying. Jack stepped closer, his eyes raw with honesty. "I know this will sound impossible, maybe even wrong to you, but I need to say it. I love you, Catreen, and I want you not as my employee, but as my partner, as my wife." The words hung in the air like thunder. Catreen's heart stopped. She stared at him, her body trembling. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. Then the weight of it hit her, and she shook her head violently. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't possible." Jack's chest tightened. "Why not?" "Because," she cried, her voice breaking, "you're a billionaire. You live in a world I don't belong to. I'm poor, homeless, unwanted by society, and I'm black. Do you know what people will say? Do you know what they'll think of you? Of us?" Jack's eyes softened, pain washing over him. "Do you think I care about what people say? Do you think their voices mean more to me than my daughter's laughter? Than the life you've given us? I don't care about wealth or class or skin. I only care about love, and I love you." Catreen's tears spilled over. She wanted to believe him, but years of rejection weighed on her heart. People had always reminded her she was less, that she didn't belong. Could she really believe it? She turned away, whispering, I can't let myself dream of something that isn't meant for me." At that moment, a small sound broke the tension. "Ah!" Both Jack and Catreen turned. Frenzi was in the doorway, leaning against the frame, her eyes wide and her body trembling as she tried to balance. Her lips moved, struggling, forcing out a sound. "Catreen!" It was faint, broken, but it was a word. The first word she had ever spoken in her life. Catreen's hands flew to her mouth as tears poured down her face. Jack dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. Frenzi stretched her shaking hand toward Catreen, her eyes pleading. Jack looked up at Catreen with tears streaming down his face. "She's calling you. She needs you. We both do." Something shattered inside Catreen, the wall she had built from years of pain. She rushed to Frenzi, wrapping her arms around her fragile body. Frenzi leaned into her, smiling with more joy than ever before. Jack placed his hand gently over both of them, his voice breaking. "No more barriers, no more walls, not between us, not between anyone. We are a family now, equal forever." And in that moment, the mansion no longer felt cold. It was filled with warmth, not from money, not from power, but from love that had conquered every boundary of race, class, and pride. Jack, Catreen, and Frenzi, three broken souls who had found one another, were no longer alone. They were a family. And so love proved stronger than wealth, stronger than prejudice, stronger than silence. A black girl who had been dismissed by society became the miracle a billionaire had been praying for. A father found humility, a daughter found her voice, and together, they built a new life, one not defined by color or class, but by love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Share it with someone who believes love can break all barriers.